Section 54 of The Book of Household Management. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine Blashford. The Book of Household Management by Isabella Beeton. Recipes, Chapter 25, Part 1. Boiled artichokes, 1080. Ingredients. To each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, a piece of soda the size of a shilling, artichokes. Mode. Wash the artichokes well in several waters, see that no insects remain about them, and trim away the leaves at the bottom. Cut off the stems and put them into boiling water, to which have been added salt and soda in the above proportion. Keep the saucepan uncovered and let them boil quickly until tender. Ascertain when they are done by thrusting a fork in them, or by trying if the leaves can be easily removed. Take them out, let them drain for a minute or two, and serve in a napkin or with a little white sauce poured over. A tureen of melted butter should accompany them. This vegetable, unlike any other, is considered better for being gathered 2 or 3 days, but they must be well soaked and washed previous to dressing. Time, 20 to 25 minutes after the water boils. Sufficient, a dish of 5 or 6 for 4 persons. Seasonable from July to the beginning of September. The compositae or composite flowers. This family is so extensive as to contain nearly a 12th part of the whole of the vegetable kingdom. It embraces about 9,000 species distributed over almost every country, and new discoveries are constantly being made and added to the number. Towards the poles their numbers diminish, and slightly also towards the equator, but they abound in the tropical and subtropical islands, and in the tracts of continent not far from the seashore. Among esculent vegetables, the lettuce, salsify, scorzonera, cardoon, and artichoke belong to the family. Fried artichokes, entremet or small dish to be served with the second course. 1081. Ingredients. 5 or 6 artichokes, salt and water. For the batter, 1/4 pound of flour, a little salt, the yolk of 1 egg, milk. Mode. Trim and boil the artichokes by recipe number 1080 and rub them over with lemon juice to keep them white. When they are quite tender, take them up, remove the chokes, and divide the bottoms. Dip each piece into batter, fry them in hot lard or dripping, and garnish the dish with crisped parsley. Serve with plain melted butter. Time, 20 minutes to boil the artichokes, 5 to 7 minutes to fry them. Sufficient, 5 or 6 for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from July to the beginning of September. A French mode of cooking artichokes. 1082. Ingredients. 5 or 6 artichokes. To each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, 1 bunch of savoury herbs, 2 ounces of butter. Mode. Cut the ends of the leaves, as also the stems. Put the artichokes into boiling water with the above proportion of salt, pepper, herbs, and butter. Let them boil quickly until tender, keeping the lid of the saucepan off, and when the leaves come out easily, they are cooked through. To keep them a beautiful green, put a large piece of cinder into a muslin bag and let it boil with them. Serve with plain melted butter. Time, 20 to 25 minutes. Sufficient, 5 or 6 sufficient for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from July to the beginning of September. Artichokes à l'italienne. 1083. Ingredients. 4 or 6 artichokes, salt and butter, about half a pint of good gravy. Mode. Trim and cut the artichokes into quarters, and boil them until tender in water mixed with a little salt and butter. When done, drain them well, and lay them all round the dish with the leaves outside. Have ready some good gravy, highly flavoured with mushrooms. Reduce it until quite thick, and pour it round the artichokes and serve. Time, 20 to 25 minutes to boil the artichokes. Sufficient for 1 side dish. Seasonable from July to the beginning of September. Constituent properties of the artichoke. According to the analysis of Braconnay, the constituent elements of an artichoke are starch 30, albumin 10, uncrystallizable sugar 148, gum 12, fixed oil 1, woody fibre 12, inorganic matter 27, and water 770. Boiled Jerusalem artichokes 1084. Ingredients. To each 1 gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Artichokes. Mode. Wash, peel, and shape the artichokes in a round or oval form, and put them into a saucepan with sufficient cold water to cover them, salted in the above proportion. Let them boil gently until tender. Take them up, drain them, and serve them in a napkin or plain, whichever mode is preferred. Send to table with them a tureen of melted butter or cream sauce, a little of which may be poured over the artichokes when they are not served in a napkin. Time about 20 minutes after the water boils. Average cost 2 pence per pound. Sufficient 10 for a dish for 6 persons. Seasonable from September to June. Uses of the Jerusalem artichoke. This being a tuberous rooted plant with leafy stems from 4 to 6 feet high, it is alleged that its tops will afford as much fodder per acre as a crop of oats, or more, and its roots half as many tubers as an ordinary crop of potatoes. The tubers, being abundant in the market gardens, are to be had at little more than the price of potatoes. The fibres of the stems may be separated by maceration and manufactured into cordage or cloth, and this is said to be done in some parts of the north and west of France, as about Hagenau, where this plant on the poor sandy soils is an object of field culture. Mashed Jerusalem artichokes. 1085. Ingredients. To each 1 gallon of water allow 1 ounce of salt, 15 or 16 artichokes, 1 ounce of butter, pepper and salt to taste. Mode. Boil the artichokes as in the preceding recipe until tender, drain and press the water from them and beat them up with a fork. When thoroughly mashed and free from lumps, put them into a saucepan with the butter and a seasoning of white pepper and salt. Keep stirring over the fire until the artichokes are quite hot, and serve. Time about 20 minutes. Average cost 2 pence per pound. Sufficient for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable from September to June. Jerusalem artichokes with white sauce. Entremet, or to be served with the second course as a side dish. 1086. Ingredients. 12 to 15 artichokes, 12 to 15 Brussels sprouts, half a pint of white sauce No. 538. Mode. Peel and cut the artichokes in the shape of a pear, cut a piece off the bottom of each that they may stand upright in the dish, and boil them in salt and water until tender. Have ready half a pint of white sauce made by recipe No. 538. Dish the artichokes, pour over them the sauce, and place between each a fine Brussels sprout. These should be boiled separately and not with the artichokes. Time about 20 minutes. Average cost 2 pence per pound. Sufficient for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable from September to June. The Jerusalem artichoke. This plant is well known, being for its tubers cultivated not only as a garden vegetable, but also as an agricultural crop. By many it is much esteemed as an esculent when cooked in various ways, and the domesticated animals eat both the fresh foliage and the tubers with great relish. By some they are not only considered nourishing, but even fattening. Boiled asparagus. 1087. Ingredients. To each half gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoon of salt. Asparagus. Mode. Asparagus should be dressed as soon as possible after it is cut, although it may be kept for a day or two by putting the stalks into cold water. Yet, to be good, like every other vegetable, it cannot be cooked too fresh. Scrape the white part of the stems, beginning from the head, and throw them into cold water. Then tie them into bundles of about 20 each, keeping the heads all one way, and cut the stalks evenly that they may all be the same length. Put them into boiling water, with salt in the above proportion. Keep them boiling quickly until tender, with the saucepan uncovered. When the asparagus is done, dish it upon toast, which should be dipped in the water it was cooked in, and leave the white ends outwards each war, with the points meeting in the middle. Serve with a tureen of melted butter. Time 15 to 18 minutes after the water boils. Average cost, in full season 2 shillings 6pence the 100 heads. Sufficient, allow about 50 heads for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable, may be had forced from January, but cheapest in May, June and July. Asparagus. This plant belongs to the variously featured family of the order Liliaceae, which in the temperate regions of both hemispheres are most abundant, and between the tropics gigantic in size and arborescent in form. Asparagus is a native of Great Britain, and is found on various parts of the sea-coast and in the fens of Lincolnshire. At Kynarve Cove in Cornwall there is an island called Asparagus Island, from the abundance in which it is there found. The uses to which the young shoots are applied, and the manure in which they are cultivated in order to bring them to the highest state of excellence, have been a study with many kitchen gardeners. Asparagus peas. Entremet, or to be served as a side dish with the second course. 1088. Ingredients. 100 heads of asparagus, 2 ounces of butter, a small bunch of parsley, 2 or 3 green onions, flour, 1 lump of sugar, the yolks of 2 eggs, 4 tablespoonfuls of cream, salt. Mode. Carefully scrape the asparagus, cut it into pieces of an equal size, avoiding that which is in the least hard or tough, and throw them into cold water. Then boil the asparagus in salt and water until 3 parts done. Take it out, drain, and place it on a cloth to dry the moisture away from it. Put it into a stewpan with the butter, parsley, and onions, and shake over a brisk fire for 10 minutes. Dredge in a little flour, add the sugar, and moisten with boiling water. When boiled a short time and reduced, take out the parsley and onions, thicken with the yolks of 2 eggs beaten with the cream, add a seasoning of salt, and when the whole is on the point of simmering, serve. Make the sauce sufficiently thick to adhere to the vegetable. Time altogether half an hour. Average cost 1s. 6d a pint. Seasonable in May, June, and July. Medicinal uses of asparagus. This plant not only acts as a wholesome and nutritious vegetable, but also as a diuretic, aperient, and deobstruent. The chemical analysis of its juice discovers its composition to be a peculiar crystallizable principle called asparagine, albumin, mannite, malic acid, and some salts. Thors says the cellular tissue contains a substance similar to sage. The berries are capable of undergoing vinous fermentation and affording alcohol by distillation. In their unripe state, they possess the same properties as the roots, and probably in a much higher degree. Asparagus pudding, a delicious dish to be served with the second course. 1089. Ingredients: half a pint of asparagus peas, 4 eggs, 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, 1 tablespoonful of very finely minced ham, 1 ounce of butter, pepper and salt to taste, milk. Mode: cut up the nice green tender parts of asparagus, about the size of peas. Put them into a basin with the eggs, which should be well beaten, and the flour, ham, butter, pepper, and salt. Mix all these ingredients well together and moisten with sufficient milk to make the pudding of the consistency of thick batter. Put it into a pint buttered mould, tie it down tightly with a floured cloth, place it in boiling water, and let it boil for 2 hours. Turn it out of the mould onto a hot dish and pour plain melted butter round but not over the pudding. Green peas pudding may be made in exactly the same manner, substituting peas for the asparagus. Time 2 hours. Average cost 1s. 6d per pint. Seasonable in May, June, and July. Boiled French beans. 1090. Ingredients: to each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoon of salt, a very small piece of soda. Mode: this vegetable should always be eaten young, as when allowed to grow too long, it tastes stringy and tough when cooked. Cut off the heads and tails and a thin strip on each side of the beans to remove the strings. Then divide each bean into 4 or 6 pieces, according to size, cutting them lengthways in a slanting direction, and as they are cut, put them into cold water, with a small quantity of salt dissolved in it. Have ready a saucepan of boiling water, with salt and soda in the above proportion. Put in the beans, keep them boiling quickly, with the lid uncovered, and be careful that they do not get smoked. When tender, which may be ascertained by their sinking to the bottom of the saucepan, take them up, throw them into a colander, and when drained, dish and serve with plain melted butter. When very young, beans are sometimes served whole. When they are thus dressed, their colour and flavour are much better preserved, but the more general way of dressing them is to cut them into thin strips. Time: very young beans 10 to 12 minutes, moderate size 15 to 20 minutes after the water boils. Average cost in full season 1s. 4d a peck, but when forced, very expensive. Sufficient: allow half a peck for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable from the middle of July to the end of September, but may be had forced from February to the beginning of June. French mode of cooking French beans. 1091. Ingredients: a quart of French beans, 3 ounces of fresh butter, pepper and salt to taste, the juice of half a lemon. Mode: cut and boil the beans by the preceding recipe, and when tender, put them into a stewpan and shake over the fire to dry away the moisture from the beans. When quite dry and hot, add the butter, pepper, salt, and lemon juice. Keep moving the stewpan without using a spoon, as that would break the beans, and when the butter is melted and all is thoroughly hot, serve. If the butter should not mix well, add a tablespoonful of gravy and serve very quickly. Time: about quarter of an hour to boil the beans, 10 minutes to shake them over the fire. Average cost in full season about 1s. 4d a peck. Sufficient for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from the middle of July to the end of September. Boiled Broad or Windsor beans. 1092. Ingredients: to each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Beans. Mode: this is a favourite vegetable with many persons, but to be nice, should be young and freshly gathered. After shelling the beans, put them into boiling water, salted in the above proportion, and let them boil rapidly until tender. Drain them well in a colander, dish and serve with them separately a tureen of parsley and butter. Boiled bacon should always accompany this vegetable, but the beans should be cooked separately. It is usually served with the beans laid round and the parsley and butter in a tureen. Beans also make an excellent garnish to a ham, and when used for this purpose, if very old, should have their skins removed. Time: very young beans 15 minutes, when of a moderate size 20 to 25 minutes or longer. Average cost, unshelled, 6d per peck. Sufficient, allow 1 peck for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable in July and August. Nutritive properties of the bean. The produce of beans in meal is, like that of peas, more in proportion to the grain than in any of the cereal grasses. A bushel of beans is supposed to yield 14 pounds more of flour than a bushel of oats, and a bushel of peas 18 pounds more, or, according to some, 20 pounds. 1,000 parts of bean flour were found by Sir Il Davy to yield 570 parts of nutritive matter, of which 426 were mucilage or starch, 103 gluten, and 41 extract or matter rendered insoluble during the process. Broad beans à la poulette, 1093. Ingredients: 2 pints of broad beans, half a pint of stock or broth, a small bunch of savoury herbs including parsley, a small lump of sugar, the yolk of 1 egg, quarter a pint of cream, pepper and salt to taste. Mode. Procure some young and freshly gathered beans and shell sufficient to make 2 pints. Boil them as in the preceding recipe until nearly done, then drain them and put them into a stew pan with the stock, finely minced herbs and sugar. Stew the beans until perfectly tender and the liquor has dried away a little, then beat up the yolk of an egg with the cream, add this to the beans, let the whole get thoroughly hot, and when on the point of simmering, serve. Should the beans be very large, the skin should be removed previously to boiling them. Time, 10 minutes to boil the beans, 15 minutes to stew them in the stock. Average cost, unshelled, 6d. per peck. Seasonable in July and August. Origin and varieties of the bean. This valuable plant is said to be a native of Egypt, but like other plants which have been domesticated, its origin is uncertain. It has been cultivated in Europe and Asia from time immemorial, and has been long known in Britain. Its varieties may be included under 2 general heads: the white or garden beans, and the grey or field beans of the former, sown in the fields. The mazagan and long pod are almost the only sorts. Of the latter, those known as the horse bean, the small or ticks, and the prolific of Heligoland are the principal sorts. New varieties are procured in the same manner as in other plants. Boiled beetroot, 1094. Ingredients: beetroot, boiling water. Mode. When large, young and juicy, this vegetable makes a very excellent addition to winter salads, and may easily be converted into an economical and quickly made pickle. See No. 369. Beetroot is more frequently served cold than hot. When the latter mode is preferred, melted butter should be sent to table with it. It may also be stewed with button onions, or boiled and served with roasted onions. Wash the beets thoroughly, but do not prick or break the skin before they are cooked, or they would lose their beautiful colour in boiling. Put them into boiling water and let them boil until tender, keeping them well covered. If to be served hot, remove the peel quickly, cut the beetroot into thick slices, and send to table with melted butter. For salads, pickle, etc., let the root cool, then peel and cut it into slices. Time, small beetroot 1 1/2 to 2 hours, large 2 1/2 to 3 hours. Average cost, in full season, 2d. each. Seasonable, may be had at any time. Beetroot. The geographical distribution of the order saltworts, Salsolaceae, to which beetroot belongs, is most common in extratropical and temperate regions, where they are common weeds, frequenting waste places, among rubbish, and on marshes by the seashore. In the tropics they are rare. They are characterized by the large quantities of mucilage, sugar, starch, and alkaline salts which are found in them. Many of them are used as pot herbs, and some are emetic and vermifuge in their medicinal properties. The root of garden or red beet is exceedingly wholesome and nutritious, and Dr. Lyon Playfair has recommended that a good brown bread may be made by rasping down this root with an equal quantity of flour. He says that the average quality of flour contains about 12% of azotized principles adapted for the formation of flesh, and the average quality of beet contains about 2% of the same materials. Boiled broccoli, 1095. Ingredients: to each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Broccoli. Mode. Strip off the dead outside leaves, and the inside ones cut off level with the flour. Cut off the stalk close at the bottom, and put the broccoli into cold salt and water, with the heads downwards. When they have remained in this for about 3/4 of an hour, and they are perfectly free from insects, put them into a saucepan of boiling water, salted in the above proportion, and keep them boiling quickly over a brisk fire, with the saucepan uncovered. Take them up with a slice the moment they are done, drain them well, and serve with a tureen of melted butter, a little of which should be poured over the broccoli. If left in the water after it is done, it will break, its colour will be spoiled, and its crispness gone. Time, small broccoli 10 to 15 minutes, large one 20 to 25 minutes. Average cost, 2d. each. Sufficient 2 for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from October to March, plentiful in February and March. The kohlrabi or turnip cabbage. This variety presents a singular development inasmuch as the stem swells out like a large turnip on the surface of the ground, the leaves shooting from it all round, and the top being surmounted by a cluster of leaves issuing from it. Although not generally grown as a garden vegetable, if used when young and tender, it is wholesome, nutritious, and very palatable. Boiled Brussels sprouts, 1096. Ingredients. To each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, a very small piece of soda. Mode. Clean the sprouts from insects, nicely wash them, and pick off any dead or discoloured leaves from the outsides. Put them into a saucepan of boiling water with salt and soda in the above proportion. Keep the pan uncovered and let them boil quickly over a brisk fire until tender. Drain, dish, and serve with a tureen of melted butter or with a maître d'hôtel sauce poured over them. Another mode of serving is when they are dished to stir in about 1½ ounces of butter and a seasoning of pepper and salt. They must, however, be sent to table very quickly, as being so very small, this vegetable soon cools. Where the cook is very expeditious, this vegetable, when cooked, may be arranged on the dish in the form of a pineapple, and so served has a very pretty appearance. Time from 9 to 12 minutes after the water boils. Average cost 1 shilling 4d per peck. Sufficient. Allow between 40 and 50 for 5 or 6 persons. Seasonable from November to March. Savoys and Brussels sprouts. When the green kale or borecole has been advanced a step further in the path of improvement, it assumes the headed or hearting character with blistered leaves. It is then known by the name of Savoys and Brussels sprouts. Another of its headed forms, but with smooth glaucous leaves, is the cultivated cabbage of our gardens, the borecole oleracea capitula of science, and all its varieties of green, red, dwarf, tall, early, late, round, conical, flat, and all the forms into which it is possible to put it. To boil young greens or sprouts, 1097. Ingredients. To each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, a very small piece of soda. Mode. Pick away all the dead leaves and wash the greens well in cold water. Drain them in a colander and put them into fast boiling water with salt and soda in the above proportion. Keep them boiling quickly with the lid uncovered until tender, and the moment they are done, take them up, or their colour will be spoiled. When well drained, serve. The great art in cooking greens properly, and to have them a good colour, is to put them into plenty of fast boiling water, to let them boil very quickly, and to take them up the moment they become tender. Time. Broccoli sprouts 10 to 12 minutes, young greens 10 to 12 minutes, sprouts 12 minutes after the water boils. Seasonable. Sprouts of various kinds may be had all the year. Green kale or borecole. When colewort or wild cabbage is brought into a state of cultivation, its character becomes greatly improved, although it still retains the loose, open leaves, and in this form it is called green kale or borecole. The scientific name is Borecole oleracea acephala, and of it there are many varieties, both as regards the form and colour of the leaves, as well as the height which the plants attain. We may observe that among them are included the thousand-headed and the cow or tree cabbage. Boiled cabbage, 1098. Ingredients. To each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, a very small piece of soda. Mode. Pick off all the dead outside leaves, cut off as much of the stalk as possible, and cut the cabbages across twice at the stalk end. If they should be very large, quarter them. Wash them well in cold water, place them in a colander and drain, then put them into plenty of fast boiling water, to which have been added salt and soda in the above proportions. Stir them down once or twice in the water, keep the pan uncovered, and let them boil quickly until tender. The instant they are done, take them up into a colander, place a plate over them, let them thoroughly drain, dish, and serve. Time. Large cabbages or savoys, 1/3 to 3/4 of an hour. Young summer cabbage, 10 to 12 minutes after the water boils. Average cost, 2d each in full season. Sufficient 2 large ones for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable. Cabbages and sprouts of various kinds at any time. The cabbage tribe, their origin. Of all the tribes of the cruciferae, this is by far the most important. Its scientific name is Brassicaceae, and it contains a collection of plants which both in themselves and their products occupy a prominent position in agriculture, commerce, and domestic economy. On the cliffs of Dover and in many places on the coasts of Dorsetshire, Cornwall, and Yorkshire, there grows a wild plant with variously indented, much waved, and loose spreading leaves of a sea-green colour and large yellow flowers. In spring, the leaves of this plant are collected by the inhabitants, who, after boiling them in 2 waters to remove the saltness, use them as a vegetable along with their meat. This is the Brassica oleracea of science, the wild cabbage or colewort, from which have originated all the varieties of cabbage, cauliflower, greens, and broccoli. Stewed red cabbage, 1099. Ingredients: 1 red cabbage, a small slice of ham, half an ounce of fresh butter, 1 pint of weak stock or broth, 1 gill of vinegar, salt and pepper to taste, 1 tablespoonful of pounded sugar. Mode: cut the cabbage into very thin slices, put it into a stew pan with the ham cut in dice, the butter, half a pint of stock, and the vinegar. Cover the pan closely and let it stew for 1 hour. When it is very tender, add the remainder of the stock, a seasoning of salt and pepper, and the pounded sugar. Mix all well together, stir over the fire until nearly all the liquor is dried away, and serve. Fried sausages are usually sent to table with this dish. They should be laid round and on the cabbage as a garnish. Time rather more than 1 hour. Average cost 4d each. Sufficient for 4 persons. Seasonable from September to January. The wild cabbage or colewort. This plant, as it is found on the sea cliffs of England, presents us with the origin of the cabbage tribe in its simplest and normal form. In this state it is the true collet or colewort, although the name is now applied to any young cabbage which has a loose and open heart. Boiled carrots, 1100. Ingredients: to each half a gallon of water, allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Carrots. Mode: cut off the green tops, wash and scrape the carrots, and should there be any black specks, remove them. If very large, cut them in halves, divide them lengthways into 4 pieces, and put them into boiling water, salted in the above proportion. Let them boil until tender, which may be ascertained by thrusting a fork into them. Dish and serve very hot. This vegetable is an indispensable accompaniment to boiled beef. When thus served, it is usually boiled with the beef, a few carrots are placed round the dish as a garnish, and the remainder sent to table in a vegetable dish. Young carrots do not require nearly so much boiling, nor should they be divided. These make a nice addition to stewed veal, etc. Time. Large carrots 1 3/4 to 2 1/4 hours, young ones about half an hour. Average cost 6d to 8d per bunch of 18. Sufficient 4 large carrots for 5 or 6 persons. Seasonable, young carrots from April to June, old ones at any time. Origin of the carrot. In its wild state, this vegetable is found plentifully in Britain, both in cultivated lands and by waysides, and is known by the name of bird's nest, from its umbels of fruit becoming incurved from a hollow cup, like a bird's nest. In this state, its root is whitish, slender, and hard, with an acrid, disagreeable taste and a strong aromatic smell, and was formerly used as an aperient. When cultivated, it is reddish, thick, fleshy, with a pleasant odour and a peculiar, sweet, mucilaginous taste. The carrot is said by naturalists not to contain much nourishing matter, and generally speaking is somewhat difficult of digestion. To dress carrots in the German way, 1101. Ingredients: 8 large carrots, 3 ounces of butter, salt to taste, a very little grated nutmeg, 1 tablespoonful of finely minced parsley, 1 dessertspoonful of minced onion, rather more than 1 pint of weak stock or broth, 1 tablespoonful of flour. Mode: wash and scrape the carrots and cut them into rings of about 1/4 inch in thickness. Put the butter into a stew pan. When it is melted, lay in the carrots, with salt, nutmeg, parsley, and onion in the above proportions. Toss the stew pan over the fire for a few minutes, and when the carrots are well saturated with the butter, pour in the stock and simmer gently until they are nearly tender. Then put into another stew pan a small piece of butter, dredge in about a tablespoonful of flour, stir this over the fire, and when of a nice brown colour, add the liquor that the carrots have been boiling in. Let this just boil up, pour it over the carrots in the other stew pan, and let them finish simmering until quite tender. Serve very hot. This vegetable, dressed as above, is a favourite accompaniment of roast pork, sausages, etc., etc. Time, about 3/4 hour. Average cost 6d to 8d per bunch of 18. Sufficient for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable, young carrots from April to June, old ones at any time. Constituents of the carrot. These are crystallizable and uncrystallizable sugar, a little starch, extractive, gluten, albumin, volatile oil, vegetable jelly or pectin, saline matter, malic acid, and a peculiar crystallizable ruby red neuter principle, without odour or taste, called keratin. This vegetable jelly or pectin, so named from its singular property of gelatinizing, is considered by some as another form of gum or mucilage combined with vegetable acid. It exists more or less in all vegetables, and is especially abundant in those roots and fruits from which jellies are prepared. Stewed carrots, 1102. Ingredients: 7 or 8 large carrots, 1 teacupful of broth, pepper and salt to taste, half a teacupful of cream, thickening of butter and flour. Mode: scrape the carrots nicely, half boil and slice them into a stew pan. Add the broth, pepper and salt, and cream, simmer till tender, and be careful the carrots are not broken. A few minutes before serving, mix a little flour with about 1 ounce of butter, Thicken the gravy with this, let it just boil up and serve. Time, about 3/4 of an hour to parboil the carrots, about 20 minutes to cook them after they are sliced. Average cost 6d to 8d per bunch of 18. Sufficient for 5 or 6 persons. Seasonable, young carrots from April to June, old ones at any time. Nutritive properties of the carrot. Sir H. Davy ascertained the nutritive matter of the carrot to about 98 parts in 1,000, of which 95 are sugar and 3 are starch. It is used in winter and spring in the dairy to give colour and flavour to butter, and it is excellent in stews, haricots, soups, and when boiled whole, with salt beef. In the distillery, owing to the great proportion of sugar in its composition, it yields more spirit than the potato. The usual quantity is 12 gallons per ton. Sliced carrots, entremet or to be served with the second course as a side dish. 1103. Ingredients: 5 or 6 large carrots, a large lump of sugar, 1 pint of weak stock, 3 ounces of fresh butter, salt to taste. Mode. Scrape and wash the carrots, cut them into slices of an equal size, and boil them in salt and water until half done. Drain them well, put them into a stewpan with the sugar and stock, and let them boil over a brisk fire. When reduced to a glaze, add the fresh butter and a seasoning of salt. Shake the stewpan about well, and when the butter is well mixed with the carrots, serve. There should be no sauce in the dish when it comes to table, but it should all adhere to the carrots. Time. Altogether, 3/4 of an hour. Average cost, 6d to 8d per bunch of 18. Sufficient for 1 dish. Seasonable, young carrots from April to June, old ones at any time. The seed of the carrot. In order to save the seed of carrots, the plan is to select annually the most perfect and best shaped roots in the taking up season, and either preserve them in sand in a cellar till spring, or plant them immediately in an open airy part of the garden, protecting them with litter during severe frost, or earthing them over and uncovering them in March following. The seed is in no danger from being injured by any other plant. In August it is fit to gather, and is best preserved on the stalks till wanted. End of section 54.